Alright, proving your Christian faith, excuse me, my bad, proving your Christian faith or proving whatever religion you follow, right, is not a function of how much time you spend in your church, your synagogue, or your place of worship. You know, you see a lot of black people, male and female, who feel justified and proclaim to have more faith and more spirituality simply because they spend more time at church. Whether it be time, spent on Mass on Sunday, or, through Bible study, or through, volunteering their time at the church. I've had homegirls and homeboys who, always seem to want to take this moral authority based off of the fact that they're simply in church more. Not because they do things differently, but just because they spent more time in the church and they're able to recite different stories and verses in the Bible at the snap of a finger. And for me, it falls on deaf ears because they're not proving anything to me. You prove your faith to whatever doctrine or to whatever religion you follow in the real world, right? That's how you prove it. You prove it not on church or when you're in a study group, a Bible study group. You prove it when, hey, one of your coworkers invites you out to a dinner and there's alcohol there. Who do you become? What do you do? You prove it when you meet or when you go on a date with, somebody who's very attractive and, part of you is telling you that you want to do more, right? But you refrain from doing that simply because it's not the right thing to do spiritually. So you have to prove it in the real world. Because going to church, really all it does is helps you to prove your faith in the real world, right? But it doesn't mean automatically that you have more of a stronger faith than somebody who doesn't. Let's take two people, right? Two basketball players. Let's assume one doesn't go to basketball camp and one does go to basketball camp, where they teach them all the fundamental skills. Now, we're going to assume that the player that went to the basketball camp is going to be a pretty good player, right? Because he's going to know all the basic foundational skills, right? But here's the thing. He still has to prove that he's a good basketball player on the court, right? Him shutting it down at basketball camp doesn't prove that he's a great player because he hasn't proved it on the court in a game, right? So the person who didn't go to the basketball camp can play in the same game and be just as good and maybe even better than the person who spent time at the basketball camp, right? Because you prove your ability on the court, and the court symbolizes real life, and basketball camp symbolizes, church or your place of worship, right? And I say that simply because I'm having an issue just with a lot of my friends personally, who are turning to church, and I'm beginning to see them separate themselves and take this stance of superiority in terms of faith and morality simply because they're spending more time in the church, right? And not based off of proving it in the real world. I'm more impressed by people who are able to still maintain their faith or their spirituality in real life settings and applications. So if we go out to a birthday party, who do you become? Right? Do you stay who you are, or do you turn into somebody simply different just because, I was influenced. Right? Who do you become? That's how you prove it. So quite frankly, somebody doesn't have to go to church to be more, spiritual and more faithful than somebody who spends their whole life in church, right? It doesn't automatically, you don't get that stamp of approval. So we have to understand this. It's proven in the real world. You can't hide. You can't remove yourself from the real world and place yourself in the realm of the church and try to claim moral superiority over somebody else or another group of people. So, in closing, I just want to get people's thoughts and feelings on this topic. Tell me how they feel, and I want people who, went to church or who actively go to church, because I really don't, but I don't necessarily like being, put in position or, try to be forcing the feeling that somehow I'm less of a spiritual person, that I'm less committed to God simply because I'm not in church. Because you can put a camera on me 24/7, right? And you would swear that I'm in church, you could swear that I wake up in church. So tell me how you feel.